Hello, everyone. Welcome to Changing Conversations. We're excited about today's conversation. Curriculum matters, why high quality curriculum can advance racial justice and equity. And we have a wonderful guest today. My name is Ana Ponce. I'm the Executive Director of Great Public Schools Now, and I'm always excited to co-host this event with our education champion and board member, Monica Garcia. And before we jump in, just want to go through a couple of logistical pieces. In the for questions, we're going to use the Q&A box that you see right there. It's at the bottom of your screen. You're always welcome to enter questions in the chat as well. And we will try to get to questions if they're timely during the presentation, but most likely we will get to them towards the end, and we will try to answer as many of them as we can. And we have a wonderful presentation today that will surely get us all thinking, especially during this time when schools are reopening and we're starting to think about the future, the summer, the next school year, and why curriculum matters right now more than ever. So I'll pass it over to our champion, mi comadre, board member, Monica Garcia.
Hello, hello, hello. Buenas. She froze.
I think we did lose our champion board member, Monica Garcia. So we are going to continue. We have just a wonderful team from the Partnerships for LA Schools that are here to share with us just their learnings from their math curriculum rollout and how just really curriculum matters. And we have three presenters with us today. We have Francisco Villegas, Vice President of School Transformation, Karen Rinderneck, Vice President of School Transformation, and Ian Guidera, Chief Academic Officer. Welcome. We are big fans of the partnership. We're really excited to have you here and look forward to learning from you and just carrying your work forward. So Ian, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Dr. Ponce. Also, thanks to Board Member Garcia for inviting us. We started this conversation in a different conversation not too long ago. We actually just wanted to start with a quick do now. If we're going to talk about curriculum, of course, there'll be a little bit of work for everybody to do. So in the chat, could you please read that do now real quick, and everyone follow along with those prompts so we can read who's here and what your experiences are. We'll give a couple of minutes for people to get started.
Seems like we have a shy group today, Ian. I see their names and they're not checking in on the chat.
We do, they're gonna start rolling in. Ms. Montoya got us going. Good work.
Thank you.
If you're shy on sharing your experiences, feel free to just put in your name and where you're from so we can hear from you, that's all. All right, Lakeby in the house. Hey, Natalie, good to see you. All right. Panelists can't see the chat. Is that something we can free up for folks, participants? Looks like they can't see the chat.
Oh,
All right, lots of people coming in. Andre Spicer, good to see you. Thank you for being here. Caprice Young, awesome. Are you working on that, Dr. Ponce?
I think I did.
Okay. All right, well, it looks like we have Board Member Garcia back if you wanted to say a few words before we really get going.
World challenges us in many ways, but we persist. So I'll just say welcome. Thank you to my friends at the partnership who continue to just take on learning with love and with lots of focus on student achievement. So thank you for being here today. And I just want to remind everybody, we have to figure out that where our children spend time the most is where we have an opportunity to change the path. So we're going to ask ourselves, what matters in curriculum and why does curriculum matters? Back to you, Ian. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Board Member Garcia. All right, so back to the do now. They can keep rolling in as we're going, and let's just jump to talking about who's here to chat with you today. Becca, if you can go to the next slide. So I'm Ian Guidera. I get to be the Chief Academic Officer of the partnership, which is my favorite job I've ever had in my life, besides being a dad and a partner. I have taught, funny enough, every grade K through 8, and most subjects K through 8, believe it or not. I've also been a middle school principal, and after that, spent some time doing school improvement work at West Ed for several years in a district and school improvement center. And I've been at the partnership now for almost 7 years in this role. And again, feel like it's the best job on the planet. And I do it because I believe that we've been sort of sold a bill of goods that we live in a meritocracy, and that's just simply not true. It's more like we live in a caste system, if you ask me, and the path to a true meritocracy is through education, and we can do it in our school system. I believe LA can be the example. And that gets me up every single day, fighting for our kids to have the schooling system they deserve. And I believe LA is on the way. And I'll turn it over to my teammate, Francisco.
Thanks, Ian. Hi, everyone. Francisco Villegas. I get the privilege of leading the math work at the Partnership for Los Angeles Schools and an amazing math team as well. And I'm a former LAUSD student, so a product of LAUSD, and really excited about the work that we do at the partnership, in particular because of the communities that we serve. And these are communities that I lived in and went to school in when I was a child. And so it's great to come back and be able to serve those communities. I'll turn it over to Karen.
Thanks, Francisco. Hi, everyone. My name is Karen Rinderknecht, and I am Francisco's counterpart at the partnership on the literacy side. And he is one of the best partners I've ever worked with. My background is in secondary literacy. I started out teaching in New York City and then moved to Los Angeles and was an LA Unified teacher for several years. I have also spent some time in DC working with the DC public schools, and I've been at the partnership for the last almost 8 years, and concur with Ian that this is one of the best jobs that I've ever had. And it's an honor to work along the colleagues that I work with and to serve the communities and the schools that we support.
All right, those are two of my favorite human beings on the planet, and we are going to spend some time talking about ELA and math, but I also want to shout out our teammate Becca Velasco, who's helping us in the background today, and I think she put her name in the chat also. Some other cool teammates from the partnership are also watching, and they're in the chat also. It can be useful when trying to find out why Board Member Garcia has so much enthusiasm about the partnership, hearing a little bit about what we are. It's not always clear. So this is our mission, and we have an MOU with the district, and we've existed for 12 years in LAUSD and really exists to support the schools we have been asked to partner with, which is 19 in 3 parts of LA that we consider to be the gems, the jewels, the hearts of the city, which is Boyle Heights, South LA, and Watts. And we really work hard to raise money philanthropically to support in-district schools. All of our schools are LAUSD schools. Collective bargaining is in place, budget process in place, all the other regular normal parts of being an LAUSD are in place, except for some things like curriculum. And we want our experience in working with our 19 schools to be generalizable. Whenever something tends to work in any of our schools, we want to make sure that it's offered as an option for other schools that are like our schools within LAUSD to scale them up. And by intentionally working within the system and not running charter schools, the kinds of things we experience that work in our context, we think are useful for other people to learn too. And we also have the same struggles that all LAUSD schools might experience due to the various things that happen, like the pandemic, where we're living out the same sort of experience. We raise about $800 per student, and we have about 15,000 students within LAUSD that we get to work with. And those dollars are spent specifically on 3 areas, which tend to really be about capacity building for our leaders, for our teachers, and also for our parents and our communities. And every once in a while, we find something that we have used that funding that works, and it becomes something that becomes part of the district's processes, like maybe purchasing a new math curriculum, and then it becomes scaled up across the district. And then we continue to use those funds on something different. And we believe that $800 that we raise in addition to the district budget for our schools to support them, we believe that exists somewhere in public dollars too. So that's part of why we exist. But we're here to sort of talk about some of the things that we've learned in our journey that could be useful beyond our network. And also we're here to talk about how hard it's been and things that we're still not very good at and that we're trying to figure out. That's quite a lot around systems and curriculum, which brings us all here today. So we have the reason we have a heart around that part of our schools is because the board districts don't exactly line up with the neighborhoods, but one bit of love besides the love for Board District 2 and Board Member Garcia's leadership and the schools in BD2 is to prove that love. Normally in the pandemic, I would be playing basketball with my kids right now. That's the routine. Basketball every Wednesday night, and there was no way I would miss a chance to chat with everybody who comes to Changing Conversations. And I believe that's the same for Francisco and Karen. Quickly, we want to talk about some progress in how ELA and math has grown in our network over the time of Smarter Balance. Our schools have a long way to go. Absolute proficiency it still remains unacceptably low especially for Black and Latinx EO students and our special education students. But we have had quite a bit of growth over the Smarter Balance era. And we think that some of the curriculum decisions we've made have driven that, sort of outpacing the state growth by quite a bit. And many of our schools started in the bottom 5% and have moved quite far in their journey in the district due to their curriculum flexibilities and extra professional learning and the extra support of our staff. So I'll turn it over to Karen to talk a little bit about the growth in literacy over the years with our schools.
Thanks, Ian. So I'm going to share a little bit again about our ELA data to help share the story of the journey that we've been on with our schools the last several years. And what this graph shows, one of the ways that we measure school progress and our impact as an organization is by looking at the percentile analysis ranking of all schools in LA Unified by level. So what you're looking at here, the 2 bars on the graph, the lighter color represents the baseline year, the first year that each school joined our network. And 2018-19, the darker colored bar there is the last year that we had Smarter Balance results. And so what we're looking at is schools percentile rank, right? The year that they joined compared to 2018-19. And the reason why we do that is because our schools didn't all join at the same time. Some of them had SBAC as a measure initially, but others joined in the pre-SBAC era. And so this has been a really helpful way to look at school growth holistically across that time period. So a few things to point out in this data. More than half the schools, when they joined the partnership, were in the bottom 10th percentile in LAUSD in their baseline year. Today, the good news is that half our schools are above the 50th percentile in both math and ELA relative to the district. which is really exciting. All 18 schools who were in our network in 2018-19 have improved in their relative rankings since joining the partnership. And we have 9 schools that jumped to the top 50% in ELA. And there are lots of contributing factors to this growth, but certainly one of them has been an emphasis on standards aligned instruction and the systems and resources that support that work, which is what we're going to be digging into this evening. And before I pass it off to Francisco to share a little bit about the math data, I'd be remiss if I didn't shout out a few of our BD2 schools who've seen really exciting progress over the last several years. Sunrise Elementary is the only elementary school in the Roosevelt feeder pattern where student proficiency in actually both ELA and math exceeded 35%, and they were in the top 15% of growth in LAUSD in 2018-19. And then 2 of our high schools, Roosevelt in 16-17 was actually the most improved high school in California from the bottom 5% in ELA. So they made the most growth in the whole state. And Santee is also worth highlighting. They've seen tremendous growth in ELA over the years, and we're in the top 2% of growth for 2018-19 in LAUSD. I'll pass it off to Francisco.
Thanks, Karen. So a few more schools to highlight here in Board District 2. Dolores Huerta Elementary School is part of the Santee feeder pattern. And for all elementary schools, they have led the way in that feeder pattern in terms of math growth. As of 2019, they were in the 95th percentile in terms of growth from the time they joined the partnership. 20th Street, also in Board District 2, joined the partnership in 2006. And went from 17% of their students meeting or exceeding standards in math to 2 years later having 42% of their students meeting or exceeding standards in math. And a quick note about 20th Street is that they accomplished all of this with the exact same staff that was there before 20th joined the partnership. And the only thing that they really changed was they put a new curriculum in place and they built strong implementation systems around that. And then lastly, I'll also highlight Hollenbeck Middle School, which was one of the most improved middle schools in the school district in an 8-year period ending in 2016-17. And from 2015 to 2019, Hollenbeck was number 4 in the district for percentile growth in math. All right, next slide, please. So we want to hear a little bit from you. And so we're going to launch a poll here. Please take 30 seconds to engage with the poll and make your selection. All right, I see we've heard from about half of you. Keep entering your responses. All right, and let's share the results. All right, so glad to see that no one feels that curriculum is not a racial justice and equity opportunity. So that's great. And we're going to talk more about curriculum. So let's keep moving to the next slide, please. Awesome. So before we start talking about our journey, what we'd like to do is we'd like to share a video clip with you of some of partnership teachers sharing insights about their experiences, in particular with math curriculum.
I never had a positive experience where I felt that I was capable of doing mathematics. So that actually made me feel uncomfortable teaching math.
I did not identify as a math person growing up. I learned math through memorization and math facts and drills, and that's very different from the way that we teach math now, which is more conceptual. We teach students to draw things and use a whole host of different strategies to solve problems. And so it's been really empowering for me to come back to the classroom and learn math in a different way, because I now consider myself a math person and actually identify as primarily a math instructor.
Because I was an English language learner, we would put to the side pretty much with a teacher assistant, and then I didn't experience math the way I had experienced at home. It was just drill and kill. You have to learn this in English.
I didn't understand the why behind the math, and now my kids can tell you exactly the reasons behind the things that they're doing, and I think that's really empowering.
For my students, it's not about memorization, it's about conceptual understanding and being able to problem solve and critically analyze and collaborate and engage with mathematics.
Because the curriculum is so strong, you can step back a little bit and let the kids do the thinking and do the learning together and just be more of a facilitator of that learning instead of driving it.
I was very skeptical because the previous math programs were not, I just found myself supplementing all of the time and, creating these intervention groups for my students because they were not getting it. When I saw this lesson, oh my gosh, it's not starting with numbers right away and memorizing the numbers and showing numbers. It's just making the students think. Now what I do is, I take pictures of them and then I use their little, faces and insert them into the math story that we're working on. And that is like, oh my gosh, it's like, I'm in there, I'm part of the math story. And so that's what I'm using it for. And the engagement, the conversations that they have with me and for each other, it's amazing.
So the current curriculum that we use is great because it allows all students to access the math, right? So there are a lot of different entry points. We have a lot of warm-ups and different routines that allow any student to participate in the math, and it's very low stakes. And what that does is lower the affective filter for students. It increases their confidence and they come into the lesson excited and ready to learn.
By making them into centimeters. And
Ooh.
most likely I kind of disagree with my answer because 42 millimeters is 50,000.
Sorry, I love how you said, I think I disagree with myself, because you're showing that it's okay to change your thinking in the middle of a math problem, in the middle of a math lesson, and that's showing a growth mindset.
Good morning, scholars.
Some of the skills that they leave with by the end of 6th grade is conceptual understanding of mathematics, being able to collaborate with their group. They also engage in mathematical discourse dialogue that is essential for them to be successful as they move on to 7th and 8th grade and even high school. My hope for my students now that I currently have is for them to pursue a higher education, attend college, and I tell them every day, remember, you are all going to college.
I hope that they're fearless. I hope that they see something that's difficult and they hear this little voice, my voice, like it's okay to make a mistake because your brain is growing, I hope that they internalize that and they're not afraid of math. And I hope that they're not afraid to make mistakes. And I hope that, that they know that I love them and that I really care for them.
I hope that my students will take these problem-solving skills and this resilience and flexibility of thought into their own lives, outside of our math lessons, and use it to address other academic challenges or personal challenges that they may face. I see it as a much bigger thing than just math class.
All right. Well, first of all, hope you enjoyed that video. And next, I'd like to ask us to, in the chat, share from your perspective, what is the purpose of curriculum? And I'm going to ask you to type in your responses, but don't press enter just yet. We'll all reveal our thoughts simultaneously. Okay, and if you are ready, you can press enter now. All right, see lots of great ideas, building blocks, springboard, foundation. It helps to drive instruction in a purposeful way. A tool for educators, differentiating learning for students. Great, and a way to engage students in learning and facilitate learning. Awesome, all right. Well, thank you for engaging in the chat and sharing your thinking. I'm gonna turn it back over to my colleague, Ian.
Hey again, everyone. I think the answers shared in the chat have helped us with a little bit of a simple concept that we've run into that's become quite clear. If you can click on the next slide, Becca, is that often, unfortunately, curriculum seems to be more like a gatekeeper for our students. If it is what we are teaching kids and how we are teaching them, and we are not getting an acceptable number of our students to read early on in school and to and through college and off to meeting their hopes and dreams in life, then clearly curriculum is an opportunity to do something differently. And if what it is that we're teaching is a curriculum and we are yet still underserving our students and getting through college at high rates, and most jobs in our economy require college, clearly something is amiss. And so we've been thinking quite a bit about how do you turn it from a gatekeeper into a gateway, and especially in a big school district, how do you scale it if it's a gateway? So please, next slide, Becca. So historically, to be honest, if you think about it, and if you go deeply into reading what the curriculum has looked like historically in American schools, it's actually what has been perpetuating inequity and racism, right? We have curriculum that tells single stories. We have curriculum that is quite biased. We have where there is no curriculum, you end up having variation by teacher, and it depends on who a student gets within a single school, whether they're going to get certain learning experiences. Teachers in no school in the United States, at least, really has the planning time to write curriculum, let alone the expertise. So if we expect them to do it because the curriculum we purchase isn't very good, how inequitable is that to put that on teachers to do it? And often we run into places where we have the wrong decision on curriculum level that is provided to students, and we modify it down and aren't challenging students with what they're ready to experience. We have Eurocentrism. We have boring tasks that are not benign and social justice related and empowering. The list just goes on and on and on. And if what schools are really about is teaching kids the skills of life success, and our curriculum is punctuated by these things, it's pretty clear where racism continues to perpetuate, and white supremacy and inequity. So how does this come to be? So we've been thinking a little bit about this opportunity. If you can go to the next slide, Becca. And why is curriculum such a big deal, and how does it come to be that curriculum is such a big problem, and yet also at the same time an opportunity in our country? So we deeply believe that if we could select better curriculum, and if better curriculum existed to challenge the things that we were just looking at on the past slide, and we did the systems work to scale it, it could have a huge impact on hopes and dreams for students. However, on the other end, it's sort of the other side of things. traditionally curriculum hasn't and still is today quite problematic, even though people are well-intended. So, you know, I'm not gonna lie, my own child not too long ago was studying the virtues of Christopher Columbus and in a public school in 2021. And we had to have a long discussion at home, as we always do, about the real version of history. And they, you know, they're armed to go back to school and debate these things. But that's what curriculum has been passing down, and we have an opportunity to address it. So let's think about it. Curriculum is what teachers are teaching, right? It's supposed to be what and how we teach kids, because if you open up a teacher's manual from any curriculum that we spend public dollars on to purchase in districts big and small, there usually is a teacher's guide that tells them how to teach it, not just what to teach, right? And those decisions on what is in there and how to teach it and what we're teaching are made by a bunch of people, or a small number of people really, above the classroom, the many thousands of classrooms. So you may know this, it's pretty clear, like LAUSD, like any other school district, even in small charter networks in LA, have some sort of body that picks the curriculum. And usually if you're a public school, you have to pick that curriculum that is made by publishers from some list that you were told you can pick from. And school districts, of course, like LAUSD and others, have quite a bit of power to use their public dollars and decide what it is teachers are going to teach and how, because again, most curriculum actually talks about how to teach it too. So where do they get the stuff from, right? They get it from publishers, right? And publishers who have a little bit of guidance on what to write, for the most part, have the most power on what the stories are that are being told, and that curriculum, what is available for school districts to spend their dollars on. There's a very small number of big publishers out there that continue to be the ones that perpetuate what was on that last slide, the half stories, the biased experience, the lack of authors of color, the lack of fun, joy inciting tasks, right? The decisions really made at the curriculum publisher level. You may know this, that some of those big companies actually say sure to certain states in the union where they offer them a different version of history textbooks because a state wants to teach a different version of history. And those textbooks companies will say yes, because those are big states. So the little bit of advice that curriculum publishers do get comes from state departments of ed, right? They author course requirements like A through G, that sort of thing. They also decide on the standards and assessments. They have that power over the federal government. And so if you think about it, the ultimate power is at the top level, where states can say, this is what we want in our curriculum. This is what we want teachers to teach. And in California, this is a little known fact, but probably is pretty frustrating to most, that the state says, if you want to spend dollars on curriculum, here's a list. These are the things that are state approved, and there was a process for that. In California, in 2021, the same list for school districts to pick from is that is the current one that's published is still from 7 years ago. The same one. And so there really hasn't been a lot of sharing of the innovation and amazing flexibilities that some schools and districts have afforded themselves to go against those lists to try something better that challenges what was on that last slide. And so you can see I get pretty worked up about this subject, because it's possible that you can trace all the opportunities for influencing curriculum above a school district, and also be pretty disconcerted about what's available. Now, some schools, like partnership schools and others, have some flexibilities and have tried out some things, which we'll talk about in our journey today. And courageously, LAUSD is one of those districts in the state that is leading the charge, at least in math for now, showing what's possible and picking something that is not on the list, but is better for students and more teacher friendly. So we're excited to talk about that journey a little bit more. But I wanted to share a little bit of the thesis real quick. So next slide, take a look. I want you to read it on your own. It's already annotated for you. And then in the chat, after you've done some reading, I want you to share, do any of these resonate for you? Is it 1? Is it 2? Is it 3? Is it 1 and 3, or a combination of them? Feel free to just throw in the chat which of these resonates for you. You can also say none. None of them really jump out for you as well. Thank you for those starting to share. All right, thank you, everyone. No combo answers yet, huh? There we go. Thanks, Caprice. All right, there we go. All right, so appreciate that. We're going to go a little bit deeper on all of these today, sharing our journey on things we've learned along the way that didn't work. But before that, I want to turn it over to Francisco to share a little bit of something that was a catalyst for us.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. So many of you may be familiar with the opportunity myth. If you're not, I definitely recommend reading it. I'll give you a moment to just read what's on the slide there. It's important to pause and take this in and also grapple with the fact that this is still the current reality. And we have to change that narrative. One of the things that causes me or has caused me in the past years, the most loss of sleep is just being in classrooms, being in schools, and realizing that what students are experiencing in classrooms and what they are learning and the experiences that they are having while learning can be vastly different from school to school, from one grade level to another, even within a grade level, or even within a single classroom. And so for me, the problem, that was the problem that we were seeking a solution for. How do we ensure that all students have access to grade level work all the time, and that they have access to grade instruction all the time? And if you prefer a more visual view, let's go to the next slide. Just same findings, just directly from the source. So the challenge is not that students can't be successful. The data clearly shows that they can be just as successful as their white student counterparts. The challenge really is that very often students of color don't have access to grade level work. And so curriculum can play a key role in ensuring that that access is there, but it's not just curriculum alone, right? We also have to think about the implementation systems. But before we start talking about solutions, let's take a look at the current state of materials right now in the country. You may or may not be familiar with EdReports, but this is an organization that has been rating materials both in math and ELA. And they go through a pretty thorough process that involves looking at the materials for alignment to the Common Core standards, the Common Core instructional shifts, and also their usability. And what this data was put together for us by EdSolutions using the EdReports data. This is data from across the country. This is district level data. And what this data is telling us, for example, if you look at the middle school math materials data, is that across the country, of all of the materials that have been purchased by school districts across the nation, only 19% of school districts across the country have at least one green rated title in math. In high school, you could see that that's even lower. Only 13% of school districts across the nation are using at least one green rated title. And when we're talking about green rated, that means, again, the curriculum met the standards, the instructional shifts, and met some usability criteria, but that's it. And as you can see for high school, the majority of materials are not even close to being aligned or meeting that criteria. All right, next slide. This is the same set of data, but this time looking at ELA. And as you can see here, what the data is telling us, 29% of school districts across the nation have at least one green title in ELA. But as you can see, the majority of materials are still not even meeting minimum criteria. And in high school, you could see it's slightly lower as well. All right, so this is just sharing with you what the current state in terms of materials looks like. I'm going to turn it over to Karen to talk a little bit about what else we should be thinking about.
Thanks, Francisco. And if we can advance the slide, we're going to scratch the surface and dig into those green lit materials and think about, while there are some curricula out there that's doing a great job of meeting the standards and grade level rigor. When we look deeper into the curricula, there are other limitations that are continuing to perpetuate harm and inequity to our kids, as Ian mentioned. So if we take a look at the circles that are that just joined us on the screen, I'm going to give everyone just a minute to read through some of the features that we see frequently in really all curriculum out there, but even within our aligned green lit curriculum. And we're going to dig a little bit deeper into a few of these, but these are the ways that we really need to continue to push our curriculum providers. At minimum, we need to meet the standards, and we need to think about how to make our materials more culturally and historically responsive for our students. So we're going to, again, dive in a little deeper. If you can move forward, Becca. And on the screen, you should see two infographics. And those infographics represent diversity in children's literature. And these were created based on data released by the Cooperative Children's Book Center at the School of Education at the University of Washington-Madison. And we're going to do just a quick, what do you notice, what do you wonder activity. And I'm going to ask people just to spend a minute or two looking at these images and to just add to the chat. Anything you notice or anything you wonder looking at these two infographics. Give folks another minute or so just to process. And again, feel there are no wrong answers. What do you notice and what do you wonder about these two images on the screen? Yes, some great comments, right? We look at inequity of representation. This is a great question around what, even with these diverse texts, right? Are these texts that kids had access to? Very little has changed. Yeah, we've made very, very little progress. And even if we look at the change that has been made, right, on the side of lowering the representation of whiteness, most of that has shifted to the representation of animals, right? So that's something for all of us to think about a little bit and what that means. And particularly what that means for our students of color and their experiences with literature and in a classroom, right? And the texts that they have access to. And I think something to keep in mind is this doesn't just live in our children's books, that this lack of representation and lack of diversity extends throughout our curricula. It lives in our ELA curricula, K-12, it lives in our social studies curricula, in our math curricula, in our science curricula. And so we can imagine, if we look at the percentages on the screen and we imagine what the stories, the histories, right? What version of history are our students experiencing right now? Whose voices are overrepresented and underrepresented in the curriculum? And what kinds of bias, right, are we perpetuating through the materials that we're using? So we're gonna move forward and do one more task. So the chat is popping now. So I'm going to encourage everybody to keep their notice and wonder hats on. And we're going to look at another aspect of curricula and where there are some limitations. And this has to do with some of the outputs. So we just looked at some of the inputs. And if we think about some of the outputs and how kids are asked to express their learning, Again, both of the tasks we're going to look at are from Green Lit curriculum. So these are from high quality standards aligned curricula. And yet there are some limitations in terms of what these tasks are asking of our students. So the first task is an 8th grade math task. So I'm going to ask people to again, just take a look and in the chat to add anything. What do you notice and what do you wonder about this math task? And again, no wrong answers. This one may be a little more nuanced than the last question, but anything that you notice or wonder about this task? Great comments, right? So we have a story and a task. Will learners know what a mallard duck is? Will they care? Right? Why is it important? It doesn't engage me. Great. All right, so hold on to some of those thoughts, and we're going to take a look at an ELA task as well. This is also an 8th grade ELA task, and same question: what do you notice and what do you wonder? Yeah, what learning occurred before this prompt? Yeah, questions about American, who's American, what was the what is the history, right? What version of history have students been exposed to? And this last wondering, I just saw, yeah, how do the intersections of the Civil War, right? How does the Civil War connect to my life today? So you all brought up lots and lots of limitations to some of the tasks that we see in our curricula, right? One thing I'll call out, building on what's been called out in the chat, is there's really an emphasis on skills here, right? So we look at the math task. I think someone mentioned in the plot, this is a great way to introduce a scatter diagram, but is the content relevant? Similarly, we're asking kids to write an essay, and there's a lot of emphasis on the format of the essay, but are we really paying attention to what they're writing about and the relevance of what they're writing about? Which connects to the next point, which is around just lots of missed opportunities for relevance. We can imagine lots of other math tasks, right? Other ways that we could have engaged students with this tool of a scatter plot. Lots of global issues. We could talk about climate change. We could talk about access to vaccines right now. We could map lots of data points, right, that are meaningful to students and the communities that they live in. Similarly, we could think about this prompt here, and absolutely, right, connecting the legacy of the Civil War to racial justice and injustice, right, and how that impacts our lives and students' lives today. What does it mean to be American, right? And what are our ideas about freedom, and how have those been shaped? So again, these are a few of many other additional areas that we really need to push on our curriculum providers to do better with for the sake of our kids. So I'm going to turn it over to Francisco, who is going to share a little bit about our journey, what we have learned over the course of really focusing on curriculum implementation at our schools.
Thanks, Karen. So this is one of my favorite scenes from the movie Stand and Deliver that many of you may remember. And as Karen shared, we have actually learned a lot about how materials can be even better at meeting the needs of our students. What I'd like to do right now is just share a little bit about our journey with math materials specifically to help illustrate further what our math curriculum journey has been and what we've learned along the way. So in the spring of 2014, we piloted math materials that would support teachers with the transition to the 2010 California standards, also known as the Common Core standards, at elementary schools. And at the time, we piloted a curriculum called Eureka Math. Some people know it as Engage New York. And unlike the scene from the film Stand and Deliver, where Mr. Escalante says to his student while they're driving down the road, all you see is the turn, you don't see the road ahead. We did see some of the road ahead, well, somewhat. And we knew that what we were asking teachers to do in math specifically, when we started thinking about what the instructional shifts meant, is we were asking teachers to teach mathematics in a way that they very likely did not experience as learners. And we know that that's really tough because as teachers, we oftentimes think about the experiences that we've had that led to our success and as students, and oftentimes replicate that. So we have to keep that in mind. What we're asking teachers to do is really, math teachers or teachers of mathematics, is shift their identity as teachers. And that is not a small ask. So, I began the search for materials way back in 2014, thinking about four things. How do we ensure access to grade level work, first of all? How do we support teacher content knowledge development, given that the focus wasn't going to be just on procedural skill, but a more balanced approach that also included conceptual understanding and supporting the learning of that? We knew that we needed to support our teachers with that as well. And then we wanted to ensure that we were supporting the progression of mathematics learning from, starting with very concrete opportunities to engage with mathematics, then moving students to a representational approach, and then having them think more abstractly as opposed to just going right to the abstract symbolic learning. And then we also wanted to ensure that there was a balance of procedural fluency, conceptual understanding, and application being addressed in the curriculum. So we felt like at the time, Eureka Math / Engage New York really hit all of those marks. And so when we think about the road ahead, we couldn't see everything ahead. And one of the things that we learned was that Eureka Math did a great job for us in helping us with the content, ensuring grade level access, a very visual approach to learning. The curriculum was designed as lesson plans. But one of the big challenges that we ran into is that it's a very teacher-centered curriculum. And so we weren't seeing the shifts in instruction that position students as knowers and doers of mathematics, right? If everything is teacher-centered, then the authority in the classroom is held only by the teacher and not shared with students. And therefore, we don't position students as knowers and doers of mathematics. So, we were thinking about how do we do that? And we were following the research captured in NCTM's 2014 publication, Principles to Action, that many of you have potentially read, and what they recommended. And so we had to do a lot of PD, a lot of professional development to support teachers with the shifts in instruction, utilizing the 8 math teaching practices. And it felt like an additional thing that wasn't necessarily supported by the curriculum. And so that was a new challenge that we ran into, and that, you know, this idea of like we could see the turn, but we couldn't see the entire road ahead. And so we continued to support our teachers and leaders while also acknowledging that Eureka Math had supported us with the transition to Common Core as far as the what was concerned, but not necessarily the how. So we had to do a lot of reflection and realize that we had to start thinking about what is our vision for mathematics teaching and learning, and to use that to really drive where we went next when it came to mathematics teaching and learning. So at the core of our vision was problem solving, right? Mathematics is the study of patterns, but part of what we engage in when we're engaging with mathematics is really a problem solving journey. And so we want to make sure that mathematics by our students is viewed as a problem solving journey and not this binary sorting mechanism of math people and non-math people. So when we started looking at all the curricular programs that were out there, we knew, because problem solving was at the core of our vision, we knew that we wanted a problem-based curriculum. We wanted a curriculum that placed problems at the center. And so illustrative mathematics checked all of those boxes for us. It's problem-based, it's aligned to the standards, it's designed as lesson plans, it encourages teachers to share the authority in the classrooms with students, it has strong literacy supports via math language routines, and it was accessible to all students because they start with invitations to the mathematics that are really helpful for students using math instructional routines. So we piloted the program in 2 of our middle schools, and 3 of our high schools joined the IM beta pilot. Then that was back in 2018. In 2020, we had 2 additional middle schools move from CPM to IM, and we had 2 elementary schools join the IM pilot. And then finally, as of next year, all of our secondary schools will be using IM, and then we will continue to work on how do we continue to support our teachers that are currently using Eureka Math, right, via the 8 math teaching practices. But I think as we're thinking about curriculum, we should always be thinking about not just the what, but also the how. How does the curriculum support how students are learning in the classroom? All right, would you please go to the next slide, Becca?
Francisco, is that your dinging or is that somebody else on the webinar? There's like a...
Yeah, I think it's mine.
Okay.
Turn that thing off. All right, so so far we've talked about what to look for in curriculum materials, but even if we select the best materials, like I mentioned right now, like illustrative math, there's no guarantee that it's going to change anything, right? Because it's not just about adopting materials, it's also about building strong instructional, strong implementation systems, I should say. So these 4 components are where when we think about our implementation systems, where we have focused, having a strong vision that clearly guides and leads our work, or our direction, gives us direction. The culture is really important. Systems and then school structures are also really important. So let's go to the next slide. We'll talk a little bit more about each of these. So yeah, there's a great question. How do we support teachers? We'll get to that right now. So a strong vision is really important for establishing what the culture is that we want to create, the instruction that we want to see, and then also what the assessment practices look like. Culture is super, super important. We all know that. And relationships are at the core of that. And so we do a lot of work around teacher identity, student identity, and then really trying to develop a culture of continuous improvement. Could you go to the next slide, please? Yes, high expectations are definitely important. And then the systems that we build are around aligned professional learning for our coaches, our school leaders, and our teachers, as well as coaching along the way. And the aligned piece is really important because if school leaders are learning one thing and teachers are learning another thing, that creates frustration in the asks of teachers. We have developed strong observation and feedback systems. a lot of teacher leadership opportunities for supporting teachers who want to explore coaching, teachers who want to be lead their departments and learn strong leadership and facilitation skills. So we support lots of teacher leaders in those areas. And then we also support teachers through teacher-led inquiry cycles where teachers are naming the problems that they're facing and then together looking for solutions. Structures in schools are really important. The way that we develop a master schedule matters a lot because, for example, if you're implementing a brand new curriculum, at the secondary level, you don't want to assign teachers 3 different courses that they have to teach all in 1 year when they're learning something new, right? We have to be smart about that. And so we want to limit the number of different courses that teachers teach, especially when we have a brand new implementation. And then adequate planning time. That's critical, absolutely critical to ensure that teachers have time to plan, but also to prepare, right? When you have a strong curriculum that's designed as lesson plans, we have a lot of preparation we have to do because we have to understand someone else's work. But then we also have to think about what does that look like in our classrooms when I think about the content and my students. And so earlier I had seen in the chat that someone had put in, I believe it was Natalie Rocha, something about making tweaks, right? And so that's where the tweaks come in. If we know that's something that we can make things more relevant for our students, we should definitely make those types of tweaks. All right, and with that, I'm gonna hand it back over, or actually go to the next slide, Becca. So, you know, we've learned a lot, and you know, this is a powerful quote from Maya Angelou. And as we continue to learn more, we continue to do better, and that's our role as leaders, is to continuously learn. And it's also important to think about the fact that, you know, even if we adopt high quality curriculum, that doesn't mean that we have a silver bullet, right? We have to continue to question and think about, what do students really need to be successful? All right, with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Karen.
Thanks, Francisco. So I'm going to focus a little bit on the direction we're heading. So Francisco just shared a lot about our adoption process and the things that we're really thinking about when we are looking at curricula. A lot of the things he talked about in math apply to literacy as well. And so we have a goal to ensure that all of our classrooms have the highest quality curricula available. We also are really still, you know, we'll continue to emphasize the importance of implementation supports and the systems that need to be in place in order to support curriculum implementation. We also, however, recognize and need to do more to support our educators with implementing curricula that is more historically and culturally relevant. And so that's an area that we are focusing on. We have been, for the last year, really digging into this area and thinking about what are the best ways to do this strategically so that we aren't sacrificing the standards and the rigor within the curricula we have. And so we've been doing this a couple of ways. One, we have been engaging in processes to evaluate our curricula to really look for where do we see evidence of bias, where is representation lacking or absent, where do we see the single stories, where are we centering whiteness, right? Where are we missing the things that students need and deserve? We're also deepening our own learning and understanding of culturally and historically responsive education. And we've partnered with Dr. Gholdy Muhammad, the author of Cultivating Genius, to train our team on ways to approach strategically adapting the curriculum while simultaneously engaging in a lot of the mirror work that we all need to do around our own beliefs and implicit biases and how they impact the decisions we make both in and out of the classroom. And then finally, we're piloting some exciting work to create some more culturally relevant performance tasks to accompany the curriculum. We're doing this work in Algebra 1 through the Balance the Equation grant, and we're partnering with the Student Achievement Partners to support what this work can look like with school sites. So I'll share a little bit about a few of those efforts before we wrap up today. The first is to talk a little bit about the work we're doing with Dr. Muhammad. If you all are not familiar with her, I highly recommend getting her book, Cultivating Genius. And this graphic here represents the framework that we are learning to understand and apply with her support. And really, it's pushing us to think beyond the skills only approach. Again, that's what most of our curricula, our aligned curricula, does really, really well, right? We get the skills. And the areas that it's lacking in are really on student identity development, intellect, criticality, and joy. And so it's thinking about how do we create learning experiences that allow students to learn both about themselves and others. What are we helping students get smarter about, right? That intellect piece. And then how are they applying their knowledge and putting it into action? Criticality is critical, right? Like how does instruction really support students to understand and disrupt the systems of oppression, right, that impact our communities and our classrooms? And then joy, right? Where are we creating opportunities for joy in our classroom, elevating and centering beauty and eliciting joy from our kids? So as we think strategically about making those tweaks, right, and those adaptations to the curricula, we're looking for opportunities to hold on to the pursuits that exist within our aligned curriculum, and then really add opportunities for identity, criticality, joy, etc. I'll speak a little bit on the next slide to just what we're doing, the work we're doing with student achievement partners, which is around building better tasks. Some of you may be familiar with student achievement partners. They're connected to the standards, authors of the standards, and have done a lot of great work in the past year, in particular, supporting around student acceleration during the pandemic. So we're working with them to, again, build stronger, more relevant tasks. And what's really exciting about this work is how we're centering student voice and student experience. So we'll be starting out actually conducting empathy interviews and surveys with students and educators to really test assumptions about their experiences. Then using that data to revise or design meaningful tasks that are aligned with the curricula and incorporate the 5 pursuits, implement those and test them out, right, with our collaborating educators, and then again, collect feedback on that implementation and continue to revise and refine from there. And then finally, if we can advance one more, I wanted to share just a little bit about what this process can look like in action. And this is something that I'm sharing from the amazing ELA team at Edwin Markham Middle School, which is not a BD2 school, but definitely a sister school for sure. And their team tried this out. They're working through this. They were ready and they wanted to get started. And so they, prior to their most recent unit launch, they actually, you can see in the top center there, they invited students and families also to give feedback, to help. If you can read the writing there, it says, help your teachers plan your next ELA unit. And so they really talked to kids about their experiences and their interests. They then used that information to look at their upcoming unit of study. And they used that feedback along with really looking at the 5 pursuits from Dr. Mohammed to think about, where do those pursuits live? How can we build additional opportunities to meet the pursuits, and what are the learning goals that we'll set for students in each of these areas? That led to them actually adding a module at the end of the unit. So the unit was on heroes, and they added a task at the end of the unit that allowed students to really read about and explore the inequitable impact that COVID had on low-income communities, and particularly the impact in Watts. And then also explored the emerging community heroes who were responding to the situation. And again, had opportunities to read, to write, to talk about an issue that was directly impacting their lives. And they're finally in the process of evaluation. Lots of lessons learned. I think, as we've mentioned, it's really, really challenging, right, to make adjustments and maintain the level of rigor and alignment to the standards. But it's really important work. And again, work that we all need to be thinking about and really pushing on the systems to make better. I will pass it off to Ian.
Hey again, everybody. My computer's a little slow at the end of the day. So a couple of last concepts we want to share from the cycle that my teammates have been showing around implement. We've learned a lot about how to implement curriculum the wrong way, and also some wisdom that has accelerated progress in implementing recently. And what we've learned is that really putting great curriculum that people want inside of inequitable systems in schools is a problem, and it doesn't go very well. But really, if we're going to implement curriculum well in a school, we have to be thinking about how we're doing systems work intentionally. A big insight we've learned over the past few years is we have to think about a number of integrated and compensatory systems that can treat, if we're doing it right, implementing curriculum as a cornerstone, something that really defines all the other systems around it. So if we believe what teachers are teaching our students through curriculum is really the business of what a school is about, then we have to wrap all of our systems around it. And so here are a few from our systems framework we've been thinking about. But if we do all of those things and we think about the systems and how they interact with what kids are learning, we can do great work. And if those systems are inequitable in a school, if there isn't enough planning time, if it's not as a result of a vision that people are excited for, and we don't have a good use of our leadership time to focus on student learning, and maybe our student culture isn't there yet because our staff culture isn't there yet, curriculum just isn't going to work. And this is the same thing at the district level too, right? If we just put a great shiny new curriculum in that covers the pursuits that Karen's talking about, and people only get one day of PD, it's really not going to go well. Here's another really great image I'd like to show you from Washington, DC. That's the Native American Native Indian building. Everything is a cornerstone there. If you ever get to go, I highly suggest making sure you get the food. But we really deeply believe that this is systems work, and systems work is how you improve your schools, and every school has improvement to do. So the next slide, to some of the things that I've been hearing, like Natalie was saying, and to the Maya Angelou quote, if we started in the beginning of this journey listening to our students about their goals and hopes and dreams, and families too, we might not have made the same decisions about curriculum we picked in the past. And we might not now either. And so that's a journey we're going on. Why is it that you want to go to college? What is that really about for you? Getting under that with our families and students. And what we've determined is that should really be what we're accountable to in the systems we're building around our students that love them. If we're listening to their hopes and dreams, we might not pick the same task that Karen is talking about at Markham, but they did pick that task because they are listening to their kids. And we might not have a task about mallards. We might think about the disproportionality of access to vaccines, or something more interesting that students are thinking about right now. But we think this is systems work that, if we're very intentional about it, can really build better systems that love our kids, and we make better decisions. Last thing I wanted to say is that good news is LAUSD is one of the leaders in the state on this topic, especially right now with math offering flexibility.
Wait, say that again. Please say that again.
LAUSD is definitely leading the pack in the state. You saw the data that Francisco showed you on math materials across the country. And we don't have a new adoption cycle at the state level yet. LAUSD is already offering flexibility for Eureka and Illustrative. So that funky graph, that picture I showed you before, I think these green arrows represent the possibility for LAUSD right now, and being an influence on what's iterating at the teacher level and school level, all the way up to publishers. We also deeply believe, we can go to our last slide, that LAUSD can be essentially a change advocate that controls their resources, which I'll get to in my last point. So we're going to leave you with a few things that sort of sum up our experience. And for those of you who had questions on where to go with this, a few things that are really important. Let's just have a vision that's set in the right direction, an anti-racist vision. Imagine if we all knew the 22% EL reclassification rate, a similar goal that we could all hit and must hit for Black students, and our Latinx EO students who are not getting language supports, and our special education students. Imagine a vision centered in all of those students being able to reach their hopes and dreams, and we felt as accountable as we do to the 22% that we all know. So that's one important one to think about. Next, I'd like to suggest from the cycle that Karen and Francisco talked about, let's do some piloting and some adopting. LAUSD is already there doing great work in the math area, just implementing some new science stuff too. So we have to think about what yellow and red materials exist and offer flexibilities for our schools to make different choices by piloting and not by mandate, by the way. None of our schools have ever been forced to try a different curriculum than the district was implementing. They were all given the chance to decide when they were ready. MSTMA is one of our schools in BD2, and they just finally decided on their own to go to illustrative last year. Never, or for this coming year, never were they forced. Next, the suggestion would be a part of that cycle where you do some of the adapting work, because the publishers have not yet created stuff that get to what Dr. Mohammed's pursuits suggest. At scale, we don't have the ability to use public dollars to purchase materials yet that do that. Superintendent Bias asked if we have social justice tasks yet built in for illustrative. The answer is not yet, but we are getting our capacity built to write them. And we're starting with Algebra 1 as a place to do that. So let's do some adapting and integrating until the publishers get their act together, but also do capacity building to make sure that it doesn't erase the rigor along the way. So we think that's pretty important, and collaborate as people are iterating. And the last is LAUSD can lead and is leading. Imagine a world with our, there you go, that LAUSD uses its resources and says to publishers, we will not buy stuff from you ever again that doesn't center joy and identity work and criticality. LAUSD is such a big system and such a consumer of curricular materials. Literally the industry could change when LAUSD says, we will only buy stuff that does these things, that challenges white supremacy, that teaches identity, that does, that does the decolonization work. LAUSD has that power because you have the dollars. And knowing that the senior leadership of the district at all angles, I can't imagine a person would disagree, and I've heard lots of agreement. So let's come together on that topic and set a policy of the kinds of materials we will only purchase in the future. But as said, those don't exist yet that are also hitting the standards and skills. So in the meantime, we got to work together and take the greenlit stuff and make it center the pursuits that are missing that we talked about from Dr. Mohammed's work. So trying to cram it all in by 6:45. We will hang out and take a couple of questions. If anyone wants to ask one, obviously, this is the space of Dr. Ponce and board member Garcia. You can also ask questions or create discussion now in the final minutes if you'd like also.
Awesome, Ian and teammates, thank you. I want to leave this slide up and I want to focus on this last one. Use LAUSD resources to set expectations for publishers in order to partner. And you know, I'm glad we have a small, powerful group of people with us this evening. So yes, questions, please. If you have questions, if you want to engage, turn your video on, we'll give you, but there's a lot here. This decolonize, the second largest district in the country, I need your help. And so when the partnership shared with me some of the work they were doing, I said, you know, let's give it some light. Let's include other minds. I just need to tell you, I'm very, very concerned that this work is not centered on our kids. And I'm going to tell you that sometimes when we talk about equity and we talk about all the deficits and we don't talk about the opportunity. So we need to do something different. Yes, Superintendent Baez, we need to, I am a believer in unleash the field because I've seen Central, it's just too slow for me. So the partnership doesn't have all the answers, but they are agitating and they are lifting and they are learning. And I think they're only 21,000 kids, so they're small, but they're significant in being thought partners. So are there anybody want to, Dr. Ponce, you have a question? I don't see any questions right now. I'm not sure we have a raised hand. Somebody could tell me, but I'm grateful. What we heard today, you know, I remember Roosevelt in 2009 when we asked parents to vote. And for many of them, it was the first time. And they got to be a high priority school or a partnership school. I remember Jordan got left out because they got to 49, not to 50. So there's a lot of challenge, but the partnership has been a learner. They went to those opportunity communities and things are different, not ideal, just different, but a lot more kids reading and moving through. So Ana, do you have a question?
I don't have a question. I just want to underscore, the comment that Ian made of working towards systems that love our kids and other people's kids, and really work towards that joy in the system. And I just really appreciated how what you're doing is getting to elevate the authentic voice of students and teachers and practitioners, and in this really, really important way at this critical time. So I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for sharing and for everything that you're doing. What an amazing team and just an excellent presentation. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's hard in the first week that all schools are back in sessions in some form of in-person for us all to come together. So we're honored that everybody made it and stayed for the whole presentation.
Indeed. So Ana and I are going to figure out how to have more conversation about this, because I would absolutely want us to figure out how LA Unified's money, that's taxpayer dollars, doesn't go to further cement the one-story colonization effort, but we have to be bold and courageous and call it like it is. The world is changing faster than we are, and our kids know it. And so I will just say thank you. Oh, here's a question. How does the partnership include their teachers in this? Let's just stop being racist. I'm with you, Caprice.
Mm-hmm.
Question, how do you include the teachers in preparation of these discussions?
Yeah, I'll invite in Karen and Francisco to talk about teacher voice for sure.
Yeah, I can start. So teacher voice is absolutely critical, because we really believe that like, we don't do things to schools, right? We are here to support our schools and to do with, and really we want our teachers to really be at the table making decisions, right? And although, for example, 2 of our middle schools were piloting IM and they were having great success 3 years ago, we didn't force our other middle schools to do the same thing. We simply took them to the other schools to visit and see what was happening, have conversations. And, over the next 18 months, they decided on their own that that's what they wanted to do. So I think, teachers are always at the table in decision making. That's important because we want them to own the work, right? We don't want them to feel like things are being done to them. I think we have to think about, we want teachers to feel just as empowered, right? And it's our role as leaders to ensure that we're cultivating conditions for that, just like we want them to do the same for our students in the classroom.
Yeah, I would add to that one, Monica, you probably know this story. When 20th Street joined the network in their first year, I got to spend a lot of time with them in the early days during our summer institute, going through data and planning their action plan for the year. And they were very skeptical and didn't want the partnership to come in. And by the end of summer institute, they sat me down and they said, all right, Ian, we want to do Eureka in year 1. And I said, no, I don't think that's a good idea. It's a lot to work on this year. We got a lot of things to do. And their ILT said, well, we're going to talk to the teachers who are not here and we'll get back to you on Monday, which everybody was on vacation. And they came back on Monday and said, we're doing Eureka, Ian, no matter what you say.
I do remember a waiver. There you go, Caprice. This is the things we're talking about. So I'm going to say one last thing. Just so much gratitude to Becca, who helped coordinate this, Ian and Francisco and Karen for leading us through this conversation. We are all responsible to push it forward. So grateful for all of you. If you haven't sent us your Madre Campeona honoree, know that we're going to celebrate the Mujeres Campeonas in District 2 on March 8th. I'm super excited, our 12th annual. I will also share with you when we send out this PowerPoint, we're going to send you, there's a Equity is Justice Round 3 resolution that's being introduced to the school board for action on the 11th of May. And it's not as bold as $1 billion, but it's asking for 600 million into the CENI and a 50-50 split from new dollars going to central offices and to school sites. And that's change for us. We need more, but I'd love for you to read it, think about it, lift questions, lift concerns, and just, you know, help us be ready for summer and August with different questions as you continue to open schools. We got a lot of resources here. Thank you very much. I still love the partnership, and I love changing conversations, and I really do love all of you so much. Thank you for being part of Los Angeles's village, and thank you for supporting learning for kids and adults. Ana Ponce, I'll give you the last, as our parent on the team, I'll give you the last word this time. Go ahead.
Okay, so the last word is going to be from a parent perspective. And, you know, I try to really have my child to see himself in books. And so I was very disappointed to see that the number of animal characters increased more than the number of kids of color in kids literature. So I'm walking away with that. And as a parent, that is something that struck me. As you know, I seek to help my son see himself in every way. So I'm walking away with that in addition to everything else. And again, to Monica's comment, you know, change starts somewhere. And while it might not be the huge change we seek to see, it is a step forward, and engage in the process, and let's make it happen. Even, you know, if it's a little bit at a time, as long as we see growth and we continue with the urgency, we can get it done together. Thank you.